What's up, guys, and welcome to the next episode of Faith Talk. The question that we're going to be answering today is, how can I share my faith with my friends? And I love that a lot of you guys have asked this question because it's something that I know that all of us as believers know that we should do, but it's something that we can really easily overcomplicate, when really, at the end of the day, it's not something that should be complicated at all. We get up all in our minds and we start asking questions like, well, what if I botch the gospel message? What if I say something that's wrong? What if they ask me something that I don't know the answer to? What if I don't know how to enter into the conversation and I'm that cliche Christian that goes, speaking of hot, hell's real hot. I don't want to be that weirdo. And what ends up happening is that fear that's inside of us ends up turning into excuses. And those excuses end up being the reasons that we don't share our faith with people. And it's not something that should be complicated at all, because at the end of the day, it's not us who saves people. And thank God that we don't have all the answers. Thank God that we don't know how to share the gospel perfectly. Because if we did share the gospel perfectly, and if we did have all the answers, then people would start getting saved, and we'd start pounding our chests like, look what I did. But, 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 6 through 7, Paul's talking. He says, yes, I planted, and yes, Apollos watered, but it was God who gave the growth. So it is neither the person who plants nor the one who waters that is anything, but it is only God who gives the growth. God is the one who saves. God is the one that opens eyes. We're just called to be faithful. We're called to love people. These people that we're trying to share the gospel with, and we can get really excited and have the best intentions, but what we can end up doing is turning these people into projects. Little marks on the scoreboard, like, yes, that's the fourth person that I've saved, but that's the fundamental problem with that, is the fundamental problem with fear dictating evangelism and banking people into projects, is that it makes it all about us, as if we're the ones that are saving. But really, at the end of the day, we're just called to love people. It says in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, which is one of my favorite chapters in the Bible right now, and it talks about how God is reconciling the world back to himself, and he entrusted us as believers with this ministry of reconciliation. And it says now in verse 20, therefore we are ambassadors for Christ. We are the voice boxes for Jesus, but here's the key: God making his appeal through us. You see, we're not here to persuade people to believe the gospel. Well, all we are here to do is we're here to be faithfully, to be faithful and to faithfully love people, as it says in John chapter 13, verses 34 through 35. We love people, and then God, through us, makes his appeal to them, opens their eyes, softens their heart, and he is the one that ultimately brings salvation. And so, I think there's a lot of different ways that we can enter into this conversation, and one way that I do this every now and then. And again, there's no secret formula. You're not going to be able to do the same thing every single time, because people are different, and some people have different wounds, and people are just wired differently. But one way that I do is I spend some time to talk to people and ask them how they're doing, and then I ask them how I can pray for them. And a prime example, I asked a guy if I could pray for him the other day, and he's like, no, I'd rather not. I don't believe in God. And I was like, okay, that's the first time someone's ever said no to that. And he said, actually, I don't believe in God. And I said, well, how long have you not believed in God? Has that been your whole life? Is that just something that you just started? And he said, well, I used to go to church when I was a kid, but I kind of went away from the faith. And what happened is that was this layup into me sharing my story, because that's a lot of my story. And I shared how I went to a Christian school and I faked it till I made it. And then I became an atheist when I was in college. But I realized that the whole time that I was an atheist and running away from God, God wasn't trying to rip me off. God wasn't trying to make my life super boring and super dull. But in fact, he was trying to find me and pursue me and love me. And then I got to share the gospel with him. And in fact, I'm not even going to share the gospel with you guys right now, just to show that all of us have been given the ministry of reconciliation. Caroline Robertson, who is going to be going into the 10th grade at Harding Academy, she is going to share the gospel. So why don't you guys give her a listen?
Okay, so in the beginning, God created the earth. God created man and woman, and he created them perfectly so that he can be in relationship with them. And he said that they could eat off of any tree except for one tree. And Satan came to Adam and Eve and tempted them and convinced them to eat off of that tree. And once they ate off of the tree, there was a separation between man and God, because God is so perfect, he can't be around sin. And they had sinned. So, God sent his son to earth to live a perfect life. He was tempted and did not give in to the temptation. And whenever he died, he took on the sins of everybody and put them on himself, and he died the worst death. Then, after he died, 3 days later, he rose again and he defeated death. And once he defeated death, we can have a relationship with God again. And there's not a separation between us and God. And to get to heaven, we believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and that he came and took our sins to the cross. And he died so that we can go to heaven and be with God one day.
Man, Caroline, that was awesome. And here's the deal, guys. This is why that was awesome. That was not a perfect gospel presentation. There were ums and there were uhs, and some major points weren't in there. But you know what she did? She shared the gospel faithfully. She did a really great job to be faithful to share the gospel. And we talked actually today, and I asked Caroline, I said, Caroline, if 5 months ago, before she got in lead team, because lead team, every single week that we meet, we share the gospel with one another. I said, 5 months ago, if I asked you that question, would you have done it? And she said, no way. No way would I have done that. But because of 5 months of sharing the gospel every other week, she now feels equipped to share the gospel with her friends. And you're like, wow, it took 5 months for her to do that? Like, that's a long time. Yeah, but it took 5 months for her to do that for something that she's going to use for the rest of her life as a believer in Jesus Christ. Because here's the deal, and this is what we're going to end with. At the end of the day, there is a heaven and there is a hell. And the way that we respond to that gift of Jesus is going to determine where we spend eternity. The way our friends respond to that gift is going to determine eternity. And again, we are not the people that can save them, but we are the people that can be the heralds of the good news of Jesus Christ. So hey, if that brought up any questions for you guys, we'd love for you guys to send us those questions, send out text messages, send us a DM, comment on this video on our YouTube channel. We'd love to get that back to you. Hey, see you next week for Faith Talk.